Have you ever just stopped and wondered how life, in all its incredible, messy complexity, could have possibly started from the chemical chaos of early Earth? It seems almost impossible, right? Well, the answer might actually come from a place you never expect: computer science. So let's dive in and explore this secret algorithm that might be hiding at the very origins of life.
First off, just look around. I mean, really look. From the perfect spiral of a seashell to the simple sphere of a cell membrane, it's pretty obvious that nature loves simple, repeating patterns. It doesn't seem to build with random, jumbled-up shapes. Instead, it uses these elegant, efficient, and often very repetitive designs. And that brings us to the big mystery here. On a primitive planet, with no blueprints, no instructions, no one in charge, why would these simple, orderly structures win out? Out of all the infinite, complex things that could have formed, why did life begin with the absolute easiest to build patterns? To crack this code, we're going to borrow a tool from a totally different field. It's a way of thinking about information that gives us this powerful new lens for looking at the chemistry of early Earth. Let's just call it the simplicity algorithm. Okay, so the formal name for this tool is Kolmogorov Complexity. I know, it sounds super complicated, but the idea itself is actually beautiful and simple. It's just a way to measure how complex something is by looking at the length of its shortest possible recipe. The shorter the recipe, the simpler the object. That's it.
And this becomes crystal clear with an example. So to make the pattern AB, 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 the recipe is incredibly short. Just write AB 4 times. Easy. But for a random string of letters like the one on the right, the only recipe is to spell out every single letter one by one. One has a short, simple recipe. The other has a long, messy, complex one.
Okay, so what does this have to do with a world that didn't have enzymes or DNA? Well, you can think of the basic laws of chemistry and physics on early Earth as a kind of computer, one that could only run the absolute simplest programs, the shortest recipes. So let's see what kind of structures those super simple recipes can cook up.
Let's start with the precursors to cell membranes. They follow one single, simple rule. The water-fearing tails of fatty acids all hide on the inside, and the water-loving heads face the outside. That's the entire recipe. And that one-line instruction automatically creates stable little spheres or vesicles in water. No complicated blueprint needed.
Or how about adenine? One of the crucial letters in our genetic code? Well, its recipe can also be incredibly simple. You just take 5 identical hydrogen cyanide molecules and let them do their thing. It's a repetitive, low-complexity process that just happens to build a vital component of life.
And it's the same story for the backbones of proteins. The very first peptides were probably just these simple, repeating chains of one amino acid, like glycine, linked to glycine, linked to glycine. The recipe is basically do this one thing again and again. That is about as low complexity as you can get.
So it's pretty clear that simple structures are way easier to make, but that's only half the battle. On early Earth, you also had to survive. And this was a harsh place. We're talking intense UV radiation, volcanoes, constant wet dry cycles. Well, it turns out simplicity is also the secret to being tough. The key takeaway here is that these low-complexity structures were just inherently more resilient. Their repetitive shape avoids physical strain. It distributes energy evenly, so there are no specific weak points to attack. And if they do get broken apart, they can often just reassemble on their own. This natural toughness is what let them hang around in all that chaos.
And this right here is the real aha moment. We can think of these two big forces, easy formation and tough survival, as the two blades of a scissor, working together to literally cut out the shapes of early life. So, here's how this scissor works. The first blade is assembly. Physics and chemistry are just more likely to produce simple patterns because, well, they have the easiest recipes. Then, the second blade is the harsh environment itself. It acts like a filter, chopping away all the complex, fragile stuff, but preserving the simple, tough structures that can take a beating.
And when you put those two blades together, you get this incredibly powerful conclusion. The structures that are easiest to describe, the ones with low Kolmogorov complexity, are also the very same ones that nature is most likely to preserve. It's this beautiful convergence of simplicity and survival.
Now, it is really, really important to be clear about what this concept is, and maybe even more important, what it is not. This isn't some new, undiscovered law of biology. It's a way of thinking, a mental model to help us make sense of the patterns we see.
So, we are absolutely not saying that early Earth was literally running algorithms.
This isn't an argument for a designer, and it's not some deep metaphysical statement about purpose. It's simply a descriptive tool. It's a language to talk about why certain patterns were just more probable than others.
At the end of the day, Kolmogorov Complexity is a powerful analytical tool. It helps us wrap our heads around why, in a chaotic world with no instructions, these simple, stable, and repetitive forms were the most likely to show up and stick around long enough to become the building blocks of everything that followed. And that leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. If this principle holds true for the origin of life, that simple, robust patterns have to form the foundation, where else might we see it at play? What could that suggest about how complexity evolves, not just in biology, but in our technology, our societies, and maybe even in our ideas?